On the training?
Yep, I'm here by myself today, so you get to listen to me for 2 hours.
Okay. After 20 minutes, people's brains.
Totally fine. A
Do
lot
we
of this
need it?
stuff is going back over what we did in January, so I will probably go through that pretty quickly. If you have questions or anything you've thought about since then that you want to ask, perfectly fine. I think there are about 10 slides in this that we did not cover in January. And since everybody attended that, we'll go over those more in depth. But
Why don't
the
you
other
give us
ones.
a test, and that way we'll all pay more attention.
they won't allow me to do
Oh.
that.
You should tell us, and then at the end,
Sorry.
say, I was just kidding about the test.
Motion
Glad I paid closer attention.
We really should. It should be like a little certification that we can give out saying your board attended this and they passed the test. Yeah.
But what I'm thinking is that maybe 3 hour have a stretch.
I would be happy to do that because I don't know that I can actually make it through 2 hours.
Yeah.
I've never done one of these by myself before. So, yeah, whenever you
Maybe
guys are
every
ready
half
to take a
hour,
little
'cause we
break,
do it every hour, we just get one stretch.
Every half hour.
every half hour.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody
So
keep
you-
time for
Well,
me.
you pick the time of break.
Okay.
I said, this is a good time for a break. Huh?
Sounds like a plan. We can do that. I think after we get through the first little stretch,
Oh, we're live.
that'll be fun.
Hey, audience. How many people, you know how many people are watching, right? Just one person.
Is it you? Cool.
So we could all take our phones and go online and up the numbers.
I'm
It's a
gonna
good
make
way
my
to do
family
it.
watch it later.
I think they know nobody wants to watch it.
Everybody
At least not intentionally, right?
We probably should all
I
turn
watch
our
some
phones
meetings,
off,
but
Not really.
not this.
so they don't
Good
read.
reminder.
I was surprised she wanted to come with me
I
today.
should probably
Actually
make sure
have
my
that
work
same-
phone is.
That's my oldest.
Yeah.
I told her it's not gonna be exciting.
Yeah.
We actually have a live person. Thanks for coming. All right, ready to go whenever you are. Okay. Get the date. All right, welcome. It is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. And this is the Board of Equalization and Review of Buncombe County, North Carolina. Call this meeting to order. Per the North Carolina General Statutes, the Board of Equalization must convene to hear appeals for property owners or their representatives. And duties of the board can be found in the North Carolina General Statutes 105-322. I've already asked about silencing our cell phones. I'd like to introduce everyone. I'm Randall Barnett, Chair, and Dr. Linda, help me pronounce it. Weinert, Co-Chair, and Phil Blake, Preston Edwards, and Katrina, we did it right?
Leaguer.
Leaguer.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We're all present today. And the first thing we're going to do, hopefully everyone has read the minutes. We need to approve the minutes for the last meeting, which is February 24th, 2025. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
I move that the minutes be approved as circulated.
A second.
All right. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 100%. Minutes did look very well. Thank you, whoever wrote up the minutes.
Yeah.
Ann, I guess. Yep. Thank you, Ann. All right. The next thing we have on the agenda, and if you please introduce yourself to us, we're going to have 2 hours of training.
Absolutely. Lindsay Smith. I'm with the Department of Revenue. We do these board charges once a year right before convening. It's just to give kind of an overview of the appeals process to the Board of Equalization and Review, so that you know where to look for resources if you run into things, and kind of give you an overview of what's expected of you on this board. So if everybody's good, I'll go ahead and just jump right in.
We have a question. You might not, we raised our hand.
Yeah,
first,
just
so
right.
we can't give
I'll-
you a-
Yeah, something like that. Say, hey, Lindsay, I need a minute. That works fine too. I'll go over the agenda. First, we'll go over the property tax appeal process, the powers and duties of the board, hearing preparation, general considerations, the appraisal standards, personal property, and then discovery and related issues. Some of this stuff we already have gone over. So if you have any questions you've thought of since then, please let me know. If you think I'm spending too long on something, if you got it, you can absolutely tell me to. Okay, the property tax appeal process. Who may file an appeal? Anyone who owns or controls property within the county. Joint owners can file separate appeals. They can do it of their own property or the property of others if they're aggrieved. So if they believe that somebody else's property value is too low, they can appeal that so that the person that they are appealing has their fair share of the tax burden. A licensed attorney in North Carolina can file an appeal. Business entity representatives, so principal officers, manager or member manager of an LLC, a full-time employee that's authorized to do so, or an authorized owner. Other possible representatives, a family member, say you have a property owner that is hospitalized, doesn't have the capacity to fill out an appeal and run it through the process. A family member sometimes can do that. Tax reps, especially for business personal property, you'll get that a lot. We do recommend that they sign a power of attorney so that the county is covered and the property owner, you can see that they've given permission for that person to represent them. It's always good to consult your county attorney because some counties do have different guidelines that they go by, who they let appeal properties on behalf of owners. So it's always good to check with your particular county. First thing is the assessor review. It's considered an informal review or an informal appeal. They can do a review of property if it's requested by the taxpayer. That'll start in January and up until the board convenes for that particular tax year. The review is based on the assessor's discretion. The assessor will have the authority to make allowable changes during that time without the Board of Equalization review. They'll make that decision based on General Statute 105-296. The taxpayer can then appeal that decision to the Board of Equalization and Review if they do not agree with the decision of the assessor. Sometimes informal reviews will kind of run in or overlap with the Board of Equalization and Review. And sometimes the volume and things like that, it happens. Basically, if you allow the taxpayer due process throughout that, the board, as long as they have the ability to appeal to the Board of Equalization and Review after that informal review, I think that's the biggest takeaway. Sometimes it does happen, but as long as the board can review that, if the taxpayer doesn't agree with the decision, then it's okay. All appeals should be heard by the Board of Equalization after convening. So basically, after the board convenes, all of the power of the assessor to make those changes shifts to the board. They're considered formal appeals. The assessor review is a more informal process. The decisions are recorded in the Board of Equalization and Review minutes. which is done by the clerk of the board. Usually that's the assessor or somebody that they designate to do that. Written notice has to be sent to the taxpayer, and the taxpayer may appeal the Board of Equalization decision to the Property Tax Commission at the state level. I know Steve in our office sends out blank forms for written decisions. It just has to include a specific language and certain things with information on how to appeal to the Property Tax Commission. So we send out kind of like sample forms, usually in February, March. And counties can obviously include that information in their own kind of forms. Everybody kind of does it differently, but as long as it includes the language, it's usually okay. The Property Tax Commission only hears appeals from Board of Equalization decisions. So if a taxpayer wants to appeal to the Property Tax Commission, they have to come through the County Board of Equalization first. They have to be filed within 30 days of notice of the Board of Equalization decision. And it has to include a copy of the board decision so that it's clear that they have gone through the County Board of Equalization. It's a de novo hearing. So from the new, basically they're presenting all new evidence to the state. Basically anything that's happened before is null and void. If it's the same information, that's fine, but they don't consider past decision. They just consider it from what they get presented at the state level. And parties may appeal the Property Tax Commission decision to the Court of Appeals. And there's a process to go through with that. Basically, the Court of Appeals hears appeals from the Property Tax Commission. They have to be filed within 30 days of the decision of the PTC. They can appeal the Court of Appeals decision to the Supreme Court. Basically, the Supreme Court has discretionary review of the Court of Appeal decision, and this one must be filed within 15 days of the mandate issued by the Court of Appeals. Powers and duties of the board. Personnel. The Board of Equalization and Review can either be made up of the Board of County Commissioners, or that Board of County Commissioners can appoint a special board, which is what has happened here. They've appointed this special board. They're appointed by resolution of the Board of County Commissioners. They can adopt no later than the first Monday in March. It's filed with the clerk of the Board of County Commissioners, and a copy is usually submitted to the Department of Revenue. The Board of County Commissioners designates the chairperson for this board. Quasi-judicial powers and procedures resemble a court of law. It's a fact-finding board. Decisions are based on evidence and law that's already existing. You don't set precedents. You go based on the Machinery Act, the general statutes that have already been put into place. Those decisions should be consistent and uniform when there is some discretion available to you. Your decisions can be challenged, and decisions are not final until the 30 days after the written notice to the taxpayer has expired. So basically, once their appeal period for the Property Tax Commission has run out, it's not final until that point. After that, the assessor can do what they need to do and make changes and go from there. You'll all take an oath of office to support the Constitution and laws of the U.S. and North Carolina. Your actions as a part of this board cannot be influenced by personal or political gain. Clerk to the board. The assessor serves as clerk to the board. The authority to make changes shifts from the assessor to the board, but the assessor is normally the clerk to the board. They keep accurate minutes, provide all evidence on appeal to the Board of Equalization and Review. Normally, if an assessor is serving as the clerk, they won't be presenting information on behalf of the county. Normally, that will be delegated to an appraiser within the office. Duty to review tax lists. Examine and review tax lists for the current year. List, appraise, and assess taxable property omissions. Correct errors in name or description of taxable property. Change the current year appraised value of any property. Take necessary action to bring lists and records into statutory compliance. Embody actions via orders and minutes, and give written notice to the taxpayer of any increase in value. So any changes that are made, the taxpayer would need to be notified of those. Hear timely appeals. So you would hear appeals for the reduction or increase of value on a taxpayer's own property, of other properties if they're aggrieved, and you can hear exemption and exclusion application.
How often do people ask for increase in value? They come to us to ask for it, increase. Can't y'all just increase it yourself?
I haven't seen that. Usually, I haven't seen it come here to ask for an increase. Typically, most appeals can be resolved with data corrections. Usually, it's, we just don't know. We don't go in houses. So the homeowner is the one who knows, has the most knowledge of their home. So they report that to us. Sometimes that can generate an increase, but the majority of appeals it does result in.
Yeah, I can't imagine someone asking.
That has happened. Typically, it's if someone's that's their house on the market.
Mhm.
But we don't just arbitrarily adjust them higher. Like if someone's appealing, you gotta check the data for your comps. You have supporting documentation information to buy.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Timely appeals are filed in writing or personal appearance to the Board of Equalization and Review. So a lot of times people will fill out an appeal form and turn it in, and then you guys will schedule around. But they can appeal via personal appearance at one of your meetings that are advertised. So if somebody comes in and wants to appeal then and there, they absolutely can do that. They have to be filed prior to the adjournment of the board. So in the beginning of your session, you will pick a convening and adjournment date. So all appeals have to be filed before that adjournment
So it
to
can
be
a
considered.
walk-in?
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, they can be. Now, it may be that you take the appeal and go back and prepare for an actual hearing, but they can walk in and appeal the property. Filed within 15 days of the board notice of decision made to review tax lists under 105-322. Application is timely filed if it's filed within 30 days of notice of discovery or 30 days after a change in value for PUV, so present use value. They can appeal within 30 days of that decision. Late applications. So the Board of Equalization and Review can approve the acceptance of late applications for exemption or exclusion. It applies only to tax levied in the calendar year for which the application is applied. Can't accept applications for prior years, so you can't go back and accept one for 2022 if you're in 2024. You can accept for good cause. That's not statutorily defined. So it's really at the discretion of the board. Consistent, fair, make sure that when you're accepting, you kind of have a set of rules that you go by. After adjournment should go to the Board of County Commissioners. So after you adjourn, if there's a late application, that decision would shift to the Board of County Commissioners after you have adjourned. So they would have to approve the acceptance of that late application. Okay, powers and carrying out duties. You can appoint committees, employ expert appraisers if need be, examine witnesses and documents. So sometimes people will bring appraisers in or have appraisals. You can interview the appraisers if that's the case, subpoena witnesses and documents, weigh evidence, and render decisions. So you can choose how much weight you decide to put on the appraisal that's submitted as evidence, things like that. Power to submit reports. The Board of Equalization can submit a report to the DOR outlining the quality of the reappraisal that's been done, problems that were encountered during the reappraisal process, the number of appeals that the Board of Equalization review has gone through, and those that have continued on to the Property Tax Commission, the success rate of the appeals, so how many actually resulted in decreases of value versus no changes, and then the name of the firm conducting the reappraisal. If it's not done in-house, if it's done in-house, then that would be noted as well. Duty to change abstracts and records after adjournment. The Board of Equalization Review can continue to meet and decide appeals on personal property, discovered property, motor vehicles, present use value compliance reviews, and exemption and exclusion compliance reviews. So even after adjournment, the Board of E&R can take up those issues. Okay, hearing preparation. Preliminary assessor review. We talked about this a couple of slides back. The assessor should review all complaints prior to the Board of Equalization and Review. Correct any factual errors that they find, because sometimes there's an issue with square footage that can easily be corrected. They would usually bring that to the board for their blessing on that, but those errors can be found and corrected prior to the hearing. And then maintain the perception of equity and fairness. Determining the time of meetings. That's something that you've probably already done at this point. The initial meeting between the first Monday in April and the first Monday in May. Sorry, I've got stuff in my way on my screen, so I have to look up. You must adjourn by July 1 in a non-revaluation year. So you can't hold the Board of E&R open an arbitrary amount of time. You have a deadline. If it's a non-reappraisal year, then usually July 1 you need to adjourn by. December 1st in a revaluation year is the deadline, because there's probably a higher volume of appeals. Helene damage may make it so that you have to hold it open a little bit longer on certain years, and that may be the case for 2025. It's kind of a matter of seeing the volume that you have coming in. And the reason for that July 1 deadline is because if you have a bunch of appeals going on and being heard, it's hard for the commissioners to set a tax rate, because if values are being adjusted after that June 30, July 1 range, it makes it hard to kind of project what kind of budget you're going to have. So the tax rate kind of makes it a little bit more difficult. So that's why in a non-revaluation year, but they do give you a little bit more time in a revaluation year, because that's usually when you see the highest volume of appeals. The adjournment deadline is interpreted as follows: last possible date for receiving new appeals, and then last possible date for performing duties and exercising powers. So basically, if an appeal hasn't been received before that adjournment date, then it can't be heard by the Board of Equalization and Review. You can continue to meet after adjournment to decide timely filed appeals. So if somebody submits an appeal on the second to last day before you adjourn and you haven't had time to schedule them or whatever it may be, you can still hear that appeal because the paperwork was filed prior to adjournment. It's one of those things that get it done as timely as possible, but you can meet and decide after. And I think we had that in for 2024 appeals this year. They were filed timely. You just had to meet a little bit later to decide them. Be realistic in determining the time you need to hear for all requests for hearing. And then be reasonable in the number of hours and frequency of meetings to complete all those hearings. So that'll really just be based on the volume of appeals that you have coming in, how you work that out and schedule them so that you can get finished up in a timely manner.
The average is usually 2 hours or so. We have these meetings.
Usually, yes. They're usually 2 to 3 hours for the hearings, depending on the volume.
Okay, some general recommendations from the Department of Revenue. Convene as early as possible within the time frame. It's usually better to convene in April than it is in May unless there's a real need to do that. In a reappraisal year, it's recommended to hold the Board of Equalization and Review open for 3 to 8 weeks between convening and adjournment. That's just so you give people plenty of time to appeal, especially in a reappraisal year. You're going to have more volume, so giving them a little bit longer is a good idea. In a non-reappraisal year, usually 2 to 6 weeks between convening and adjournment is fine. If you have situations where you know you're going to have a lot more appeals, that may need to be extended a little bit, especially for this year, more than likely. Considerations when establishing the timeline: fairness, uniformity, adequate time to set the tax rate. So making sure you've got everything wrapped up so that tax rates can be set and budgeting can be done. Okay, notice of hearings. The notice must contain dates, locations, hours, purpose of the first meeting, convening and adjournment dates, and early or late adjournment procedures. So basically, when you notify the public of this hearing, you're going to provide the convening and adjourning dates, but also the procedures that you use if for some reason you have to adjourn early or late. The public just needs to be notified of that.
And they're notified website, citizen time, how?
That's what's on this next slide, actually. Published in a newspaper of general circulation. So Asheville does have a newspaper that's usually, I know that you guys probably put it on the website and different things like that, which is great. The statute hasn't changed in a long time, so they require notification via a newspaper. I know a lot of counties do not have newspapers of general circulation, so usually they will use next town, county over that's of general circulation, but it has to be done, and normally they will advertise it on their website. A lot of people have radio stations, things like that. The initial publication has to be 10 days prior to the first meeting, and it must be published 3 times. So the first publication has to be 10 days before the first meeting, and then 3 times after that. Or 2 times after that, 3 entire times. And this table just kind of gives you a rundown of those dates. It's everything that I've gone over. It's just kind of in a table form, so it makes it a little bit easier to see. General considerations: format of meetings, maintain appropriate level of formality, determine the format when the board convenes and kind of carry it through adjournment. So you'll have a cadence of the meetings, agendas, things like that. Just try to make it as uniform as possible. Adopt policies and tools, so sign-in sheets, scripts for hearings, if that's something you need, evidence logs, and I'm sure Eric has all of the stuff that you need for that. Open meetings law, sunshine laws. Hearings, deliberations, and actions are all public access to records, and they must follow the retention schedule for those. Confidential information like income, social security numbers, tax returns, things like that, those remain confidential, so they would be redacted from anything that's publicly released. Avoid conflicts of interest, relatives, business partners, corporate interests, political, personal. Fee appraisals by a county employee, contracted firm, board member. If a conflict exists, excuse oneself from the hearing and deliberations, and I'm sure that you're provided an agenda before and the information. So if you see a conflict, just say, hey, can't do this one today.
Do we go sit somewhere else or do we just stay here and be quiet?
I think as long as you're not voting on that, if you recuse yourself, I'm sure that you could probably be present.
Just stay right here.
So as long as there's enough people to vote on that, you would be able to hear it. Just wouldn't be making the decision on that, and probably not be involved in any of the deliberations or anything either, right?
Keys out.
Yeah. Appropriate issues for appeals. The property is appraised substantially above market value. Not equitably appraised as compared to similar properties. And there are also legal issues. So discovery, listing, exemption, present use value. The legal ones are more so if a exclusion application was denied for excess income, that would be a legal appeal rather than a value appeal.
So what's your definition of substantially?
I think that it would depend on the property. I think it's at the board's discretion. You obviously have to follow the statutes, but if they could prove via an appraisal, say, or comps that are within the reappraisal and within the reappraisal time frame. And you can choose to put different weight on an appraisal. Say you have an appraisal that's done in November before the reappraisal year, you may put more weight on that than an appraisal that was done a year prior or 2 years prior
Oh, definitely.
or a year after, even if it's a non-reappraisal year.
But I'm just wondering about substantially, what they're asking for us to lower it 5,000, are we wasting our time helping someone lower something $5,000?
If there is an inaccuracy, that's considered substantial, I would say. It's not really based on the amount of the bill.
It could be
It's-
done by the office before coming here.
And it all depends on time frame. If it's within the assessor's time frame in the year to do that, then absolutely, because it really could be a factual error. Say you had them at 2,100 square feet and they're actually 2,200 square feet. That very well could be what you're looking at, but they appealed during the Board of Equalization's power to change. So there are some cases like that too.
That goes back to a lot of data errors or where that's, you could see one potentially.
You could see one potentially for, double floors, like having an additional floor on a sketch in the camera system, and you just don't catch that, and they appeal it. So things like that.
And a lot of times you'll have appeals where they don't feel like they're equitably appraised within similar properties too. So sometimes it's not necessarily about the number. It's about they don't feel like they were equitably appraised within their neighborhood or with their neighbors and stuff like that. So you'll get those too. Inappropriate issues for appeal, the tax amount. So the amount of the bill that they get. That's usually not a reason for appeal, not something that you would be able to make a decision on. Level of satisfaction with county services, percentage increase. That's been a big one the last few years because the percentage is quite high right now. So that's not a reason for appeal. They would have to have evidence to back up their stance on that. Economic decline of national real estate market. That's not something that you can appeal. Post reappraisal refinance reflects a lower market value. So if they refinanced after the last reappraisal and the market dipped a little bit and they got a lower appraisal from a bank, that's not usually a reason that you can appeal. Greater weight of evidence test. So do they have compelling evidence? Is it based on qualified sales on market value? It does not consider personal feelings on the type of property, expert witness, taxpayers' political affiliation, financial situation, primary residence, or physical characteristics.
A lot of this is looked at before, in their application, and you talk to them and say, you don't qualify to sit before the board because of these things? Or do we tell them, well, because of these things?
These are all things that you would consider during the hearing. Like,
So they've
you
already,
would not be able to consider your personal feelings on this. They can't deny anybody from appealing to the Board of Equalization and Review, even if they say, I'm appealing because my tax bill is too high. That's up to the taxpayer to prove their case.
and they do it here.
And they would do it here. I'm sure that during the informal review process, there is a good effort at explaining these things and explaining what kind of information the taxpayer would have. But as far as them not being able to come because of that, that would just be something that you consider when you're hearing the appeal.
On our notices of value for reappraisal, we actually put statements on there about what's appropriate to appeal, things like that. So, and tax amounts, one of those that are listed on there. It's not appropriate to appeal your tax amount.
There are questions that you can ask for the market value evidence that the taxpayer presents. You can ask if there's an appraisal, if the data on the card is accurate. Did it sell prior to the reappraisal date? Did comparable properties sell prior to the reappraisal date? You can ask whether they have income and expense data. And you can ask if they're assessed similarly to similar properties.
Have a copy of that page. You can have it with us.
I think I sent this to Ann, so if you want to send it on to them, that would
Yes,
be
we can.
fine.
Is
We
it
can
the
get that
whole
for you.
PowerPoint?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to have a.
Absolutely.
copy of it. I was going to request when you were finished, but.
Absolutely. Yeah, I sent that to Ann, so you can distribute it
Yeah,
if you
we'll
want
get
to.
it to you.
All right,
And I'm
thank
sure
you.
that we've got some of this stuff on our website too,
Sure.
if you need it.
But I think like you pointed
Oh,
out, it's nice
absolutely.
to just have the reference and have it in our notebook.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. That's a good thing to have.
It's obviously a lot of pieces to it, so.
Well, and every appeal is different. Sometimes
Sure.
it's good to have a reference just to prepare. Okay, so documentation, a recent appraisal performed prior to the reappraisal date, building plans, zoning records, maps, photos, closing settlement statement, sales data on comparable properties, income and expense statements for each of the 3 years preceding the reappraisal, and then property record cards for similar properties. So if they're saying they're not valued consistently with similar properties, having that kind of documentation to look at would be necessary. Okay, the decisions. After considering all evidence, the Board of Equalization and Review adopts an order either reducing, increasing, or affirming the listing or appraised value under appeal. You'll notify the appellant by mail. The notice must be sent no later than 30 days after the Board of Equalization adjourns.
That's what Ann does for us, right? She notifies.
Yes, we get that all set up in the office and get those mailed out.
We orally tell them here. I mean, they watch our vote.
Yeah, and we prepare the notice after the decision's made and
Yeah,
get that out to them. Yeah.
because they do have to be informed in writing. So, and that's what I was talking about, that Steve sends out those sample forms that you can use for the appeal decisions. It provides all of the property tax appeal information and things like that. Okay, the notice of decision, the date the notice is mailed. So it doesn't go based on postmark. It goes based on the date that's on the letter. That's the date it says it was mailed. The description of the property under appeal, probably the parcel ID number, an address, something like that. The value under appeal, and then the value determined by the Board of Equalization and Review. The address and deadline for appeal to the Property Tax Commission. So you have to give them instructions on how to appeal to the Property Tax Commission. The statement that they need to provide a copy of the Board of Equalization and Review decision letter with their Property Tax Commission appeal. And then DOR recommended language that is provided in the email that Steve sends out. Usually when counties do that, they kind of take the language that Steve uses in that and just kind of make it more personalized per county. Is everybody ready to take a little bit of a break before
take a
we
break.
get into appraisal standards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
This seems like a pretty good place to take a break.
Rest your
good.
We're good? Okay. Next, we're going to go over appraisal standards. We're more than halfway done, by the way. So there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Sorry about all the questions.
No, that's great. It's good that you have them. It shows that you're getting some information in, for sure. Approaches to value. Sales comparison approach. It estimates property's value by reference to comparable sales. Income approach. It uses capitalization to convert anticipated benefits of ownership of the property into an estimate of present value. Cost approach determines replacement cost new, less depreciation of an improvement or asset. Market value is the most probable price a property should bring in a competitive and open market under a fair sale. Market price is the actual price agreed to in a particular transaction. And this would be an arm's length transaction. It would not be a foreclosure. It would not be a sale to family, things like that. Market data derived from the market, and it reflects fair earning capacity of a property. Actual data reflects actual income received and may not be a true representation of the market.
Can I just
Yeah.
make one comment?
Yeah.
I just remembered this from years ago.
Absolutely.
I used to teach appraisal courses at AB Tech a long time
Okay.
ago, and the agenda came from the state.
Uh-huh.
And under the market data, they had basically what you've got up there,
Mhm.
but before that, they had in parentheses, and I'm not making this up, I saved it. It said market data is when a buyer and a seller feel like they screwed each other. And it was a joke, but the state actually put that in there. So if you wanted to make a joke, you could do that.
Oh gosh. I'm a little bit too new for that to fly well. Maybe when I've got about 20 more years and I can.
Stan could probably get by with putting that in there.
See, now Stan would be the perfect person to do that. He's like, I'm good. He probably would.
You-
No, I'm going to
Oh,
now.
yeah.
I love that
I
though.
know, isn't that funny?
They used to have a little bit more flexibility in what they could say.
Uh-huh.
Highest and best use. It requires the property to be appraised at its most profitable use, given it's legally permissible, physically possible, economically feasible. Uniform appraisal standards, that's outlined in 105-283 in the Machinery Act. Appraise all property its true value. True value is market value. Cash price, willing and financially able buyer, willing seller. Neither party is under duress to buy or sell. Buyer and seller have knowledge of all uses of the property and capabilities. Reasonable exposure to the market. Market value is not the historical cost, the construction cost, depreciated asset or book value, the insurance value, the value in use, liquidated or salvage value, inheritance value, or aesthetic.
You should also list tax value.
Well, tax value should be 100% of market value in a reappraisal year. So technically it should be tax value. Now, when you're in year 3 of a reappraisal cycle, that may not be the case, but for all intents and purposes, on January 1 of your reappraisal year, it should be valued at 100% of market value. Sometimes that does not happen, but that's the goal for North Carolina. And in different states, I think that they do a percentage of market, but for North Carolina, it should be 100% of market value during the reappraisal year.
I wanted to ask Eric something. So I've been curious in the reappraisal year if, like, just take the Ramble, for example, you know, where the Ramble is. Will those houses get a $4 million tax value? You know, because historically, they've always been like, you know, $1 million or $1.5 million.
Yeah, I
hardly
think,
ever ran into one that was really $3 or $4 or $5 million.
as far as their tax value goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, and I mentioned it during the commissioner briefing I did a few weeks ago, is the fact that that market's, what you're looking at now is 2021 values, and then before that it was 2017 values. And what's that, there's really been a lot more activity and more data that we've been collecting there. So yes, if those are selling for that much, you should see that much on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the issue with the luxury homes is very unique a lot
Yeah.
of times too. So capturing all that data can be difficult, but you still have to apply that in the mass appraisal method. So that's we should be getting close on those as well, just like anybody else. So
Yeah.
any other
That's gonna
property.
substantially increase the tax base if you get those right. It's just that one neighborhood.
One,
Yeah.
Well, we just got property under contract. We had an appraisal.
Mhm.
And then the appraiser discovered he didn't do the appraisal based on some evidence, but the seller said they would go ahead and buy it anyway. It was a conservation easement. The appraiser didn't know about it. Of course, it would appraise for lower, knowing that there's a conservation easement. And the buyer said, I'll buy it anyway for the price. I don't care. So it's in the books, this higher price.
Mhm.
Because the buyer valued it at a higher price, but the
Yeah.
appraiser really said the value should be lower because this doesn't have as many, the
Correct.
highest and best use is
Right.
only conservation, it's not development.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
And that's
That's
not
interesting.
out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
But willing buyer and a willing seller, it's still.
That's what you go by.
Yep.
You said it that way. Yes.
Use the screw.
Okay, we'll move on to schedule of values. They're used in appraising real property. They must provide sufficient detail to enable those making real property appraisals to adhere to them. They're prepared for appraising real property, its true value and present use value. So there's a schedule of values for present use value, and the county, the present use value is something that the state comes up with. The schedule of values for the county, that's what the county does when they're doing a reappraisal. Authorized changes to real property value in a non-reappraisal year. They can be to correct clerical or mathematical errors, appraisal errors from misapplication of the schedules that were adopted prior to the reappraisal year, conservation or preservation agreements, physical changes to land or improvements, changes in legally permitted use of the property, which can happen between revaluation cycles, and then some other factors. It excludes the changes listed in General Statute 105-287B. And do you all have copies of the Machinery Act or have access to those? Is that something that we need to get?
Yeah, there was a little, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a little guide I gave you all
Yeah.
of all the statutes listed. That is all parts of the Machinery Act. They don't have an actual manual yet.
Oh,
We don't have that, and you can access it online. That's the appeals handbook.
yeah, there's a PDF online that you can access. Most of the time, if I'm looking for a specific one, I just type the specific one in and it'll bring you to that page, and it's usually
Yes.
pretty accessible. Unauthorized changes in a non-reappraisal year, normal physical depreciation of improvements, economic changes, inflation or deflation, betterments like painting, terracing, landscaping, forest fire protection, impounding water for non-commercial purposes. Personal property. Listing and assessment of personal property. All property is taxable unless exempted or excluded. This includes all property that is not real. So basically, if it doesn't attach to a parcel of land, then it's considered personal property. You list at historical cost. The Department of Revenue provides a cost index and depreciation schedule to go by. Those are factors applied to historical cost. The assessed value is determined by replacement cost new less depreciation, and it's accepted by the courts. Personal property appraisal is the replacement cost of property, the sale price of a similar property. It considers the age of the property, the physical condition, the productivity, the remaining life of the property. So the life expectancy of the piece of equipment goes into determining the value of it, the effect of obsolescence on the property, and then economic utility or the usability of the property. Appraisers should consider any information reflected on a taxpayer's state or federal income tax report, accuracy of the taxpayer's records, the method of accounting, and the level of trade when valuing personal property. Personal property appeals are a little bit different than real property appeals. They follow a different timeline. You can appeal the value situs, so where the piece of property is located, or the taxability of the property to the assessor. You have to file within 30 days of notice of value. And usually personal property notice of value is the bill that they receive. So they're able to file an appeal after the bill comes out within that 30 days.
Interrupt one
Yep.
second. We actually, a little bit different. We were doing that a few years ago. This last 2 years, we've started sending notices of value to business personal property owners.
Oh, okay.
So
That's good.
And we're starting this week, and we do it before, we try to hit it before June. So they'll have a
Okay.
30-day appeal period that rolls, and they will still, we do discoveries, and we do those in the fall.
Yeah.
And so you'll see those appeals later in the year, which is
Mhm.
the hearing that you all did previous. So,
Yeah. Good deal. I did not know that.
and we do that
Thank
for
you.
those, and we also do it for rentals.
Oh, okay.
Rental list sheets, but we don't do it for individual personal property, which is mobile homes and
Okay.
things like that.
Okay.
So
Good
their
deal.
notice is the bill.
So the assessor will hold a I don't know what's going on. The assessor will hold a conference to hear evidence supporting that appeal. The taxpayer can sign an agreement accepting the value, or they can appeal to the Board of Equalization and Review. The assessor must mail a notice of decision. The taxpayer may appeal the assessor decision within 30 days of the notice of the assessor's final decision. So the assessor has the ability to make changes, and if they can't come to an agreement, they can appeal on to the Board of Equalization and Review.
Something like your car was in the flood.
You can appeal that. Absolutely.
But you have to bring evidence that your car was in the flood.
Most of the time, they'll need some kind of evidence. Most will accept pictures. I know that's a huge thing, especially if it's something like that. Now, if the car was completely lost in the flood and you don't have pictures, that may be something that you would need to bring insurance documentation or just something showing that. But I think it's based county by county. Different places will accept different things, but for something like that, I would think pictures, something from a car dealership, things like that would be acceptable. Okay, next we'll move on to discovery. This is a listing assessment and the taxation of property that was not listed during the listing period in January. When you do a discovery, the tax office will send a notice to the taxpayer containing the name and the address of the discovered person or entity, the description of the property, a tentative appraisal of that property, and then a statement granting 30 days to appeal the listing and appraisal. So this would apply to anything that wasn't listed during the listing period, January, and I think your extensions go through March.
Yeah, March 15th, their first business day, so it was the 17th this year.
Okay. So if they've been granted an extension, it could go to that March 15th or date. The discovery includes property listed after the listing period, property listed at an understated value. So if they listed the property and did not list it at its full value, that can be discovered. Listed under an exemption or exclusion for which it did not qualify. So if they listed it as an exempt property and it didn't qualify, you can do a discovery on that. Or unlisted property. So if they discover that a mobile home is somewhere that was never listed, they can do a discovery on that as well. Taxation, tax for current year and 5 preceding years. The tax is computed based on the tax rate imposed for each year. So sometimes tax rates can change year to year. So if you have a different tax rate every year, you will have a different tax computed for each year as well. Penalties are 10% for the earliest year not listed, and then an additional 10% the further back it goes. So if you listed, well, I'll just show you the table. It's easier to understand that way. Each year's calculated separately as well. So it's not, they may send you a total bill, but each year is calculated separately and then added together. So this shows you, say you have a property that you're doing a discovery on. For 2023, the penalty will be 10%. It looks like they're doing a full discovery, so it's 6 total years. Each year prior to 2023 goes up in 10% in the penalty. So you have a 10% in 2023, and it goes all the way up to a 60% in 2018. And you can see the different tax rates here. 2021, it was a 70 cent. So they can be a little bit different there. But then most do a total. The power to compromise discovered property. The Board of Equalization Review may compromise, settle, or adjust discovery bills for any reason. The tax, it must be billed, but it must be unpaid for you to compromise it at all. There aren't any statutory guidelines for ensuring it's applied equally. So it's usually a matter of discretion for the board. Obviously, you would want to make decisions fairly and equitably and apply it across all appeals of discovery, I would think, and consider each individual one. There may be extenuating circumstances on some, you know.
We did one last time,
Mhm.
changed
Mhm.
the penalty amount.
Yeah, and it would just be good to keep those changes in mind when you're deciding other ones. There, again, there's no statutory guidelines or requirements. It's really like up to the board. It's always good to keep it in the lens of fairness, though. If you have an exact same situation, you probably need to kind of think of it the same way as you did that prior one. Things like that. Department of Revenue recommends that the Board of Equalization and Review limit this use of power or adopt written policies for uniform application. So it's a good idea to consider if you are going to have certain cases where you compromise those discovery bills. It's a good idea to have written policies so that you can apply them fairly across all appeals.
So just for my I think what the
Mhm.
bill we adjusted was a late bill, not necessarily a discovery bill. Is that correct? Late filing?
No, it was just discovery.
It was a discovery.
Discovery.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just.
Yeah, they had
They went back 5
never
years.
listed at that location for
Okay.
a few years.
We did a 50%.
Yeah, we did
reduction.
50.
And for discoveries, the decision that you make on that discovery is only reviewable by the Property Tax Commission. if the taxpayer demonstrates legal discrimination or bias by the Board of Equalization and Review. That would be the only reason that the Property Tax Commission would would hear a discovery appeal.
After a decision by us? Is that-
Mhm. That would be the only reason, if it demonstrated bias or discrimination.
What would be an example of bias? How would they know we were biased?
I would assume that if the taxpayer could prove that you made a decision for another taxpayer with the same situation and basically treated them differently, then that would be an example. That gets into a lot of legality stuff that I'm not
Mm-mm.
able to
Would be
go
very
through,
difficult
but
to-
um, the Property Tax Commission would decide if there was enough evidence to hear it, I would assume. And they have an attorney that would look at all that stuff too. So, but discovery bill stuff they don't hear those kind of appeals unless there's something like that. Taxpayer remedies. Collection is delayed pending appeal. They can still be billed, but no enforced collection while under appeal, so they won't be sent to foreclosure, things like that. The tax collector can send the tax bill. They just wouldn't be advertised or sent to foreclosure. Any enforced collections, they wouldn't be subject to that until the decision from the PTC gets settled. Interest on overpayments. When an order of the Board of Equalization Review causes an overpayment, the taxpayer is entitled to interest on that overpayment. Interest is calculated at the rates and dates established by General Statute 105-360A. It accrues from the later of the date the tax is paid and delinquency date. No taxes can be released, refunded, or compromised. The Board of County Commissioners is prohibited from releasing, refunding, or compromising all or any portion of tax except as authorized. And that's all in 105-380. Unauthorized release, refund, or compromise will not affect the tax lien or liability. Unauthorized release, refund, or compromise tax may be recovered from members voting for the release. So you would be personally liable for those if it was unauthorized by statute. That would be through civil action. Valid defense for a release or refund would be a tax imposed through clerical error, illegal tax, or a tax levied for an illegal purpose. So if you double tax, that would be an illegal tax. So things can be refunded or released in that. That would be a Board of County Commissioners decision, though. That wouldn't be a Board of Equalization. The taxpayer would have to demand the release or refund in writing to the Board of County Commissioners. If they paid, they must demand a refund within 5 years of the tax due date or within 6 months of the payment date. Must be heard by the governing body. Board of County Commissioners may only delegate authority for releases or refunds less than $100 to their finance officer, county manager, or county attorney. The county commissioners cannot delegate that authority to the Board of Equalization and Review. So they couldn't delegate any refund or release authority to the board. Any questions?
I wanted to ask you one question. I'm curious about, the term revenue neutral.
Yes.
Does the county vote? Do they vote, okay, we're going to have a revenue neutral year, or is that a standard thing for all counties?
Yeah,
or-
that's decided on in the budget process for all counties with the Board of Commissioners and the municipalities, town councils, things like that.
Mhm.
But I do know that they have to publish the revenue neutral rate. So it is out there.
Don't
each
they
year.
use, isn't that usually what Buncombe County has done, is a revenue neutral?
Yes.
So that even if your tax valuation goes way up, your
Yeah.
rate might,
As long as the budget stays the same, it'll be,
Right.
they publish the revenue neutral rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in years where the budget increases, you may see a tax rate increase. I think one happened last year. I think it was raised a penny for every $100 or something for education.
Yeah.
I think that was last year. So they do put that out there and they do publish it.
Yeah.
And they'll do it. It's a key component for the post reappraisal too.
Right.
So we try to get
This
up there
year's
and
gonna
tell
be
folks.
interesting considering the funding they've taken back, especially from education. And what they're gonna do to
Make up for.
make, they've got to put it back, but in order to put it back, then you have to take on the next year's funding. But it was pretty significant what they took back from education after they've already allocated it. So I think they've got some challenges coming with questions to the budget.
Any more questions for me?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thank you,
That's
Lindsay.
great.
If you need anything,
Just the slides.
I'll get you
Got
those.
those?
Thank you.
It's on my list.
and I'm pretty sure I'm on some meeting invites. So if you need my email address, have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, now we gotta do our schedule.
You come to these hearings, or you just watch it online, or?
If I'm asked to come, I will. I think that if I'm wanted here, then absolutely I'll come. But sometimes it can make it hard for the Board of Equalization and Review to feel comfortable doing what they need to do if they feel like they're being watched. So I'm absolutely happy to come whenever. So would not make it a practice to come. Last time I came because I thought I was scheduled to be here anyway, so I just stayed. But
Did we do
no.
okay?
You did great. No problems.
That's the first time.
Do you live in Raleigh?
No, I live in Burnsville,
Oh, okay.
so I'm about an hour from here. But yeah, I'm happy to come if you need anything, but not usually for these. And then if you need us, we'll be here for sure.
I think that last item on the agenda, the new business.
New business?
So can you read what that says? Make sure I say that. Schedule. Okay. So you all have been part of those emails with Ann about the convene and adjourn dates, which Lindsay was talking about, which closes the informal appeal period, opens the formal, and then closes the formal. So I think the date that's been landed on is between April 11th and May 16th. And you just need to have a quorum available to come in. The ones I've been a part of have been pretty short, just a few minutes. But as Lindsay said, folks can drop by and drop off appeals.
You said Friday, April 11th
Mhm.
at noon.
At noon, and then
Monday,
May
May 12th.
16th, I think.
16th.
Yeah, 2025.
I think I told her I could do any of them except the first one.
Okay.
That was the only one I couldn't do.
Yeah.
So that's when it opens and when it closes.
Yep.
And
That's
our
when it opens and
meetings-
closes. You just come at those times. Be short meetings typically. If folks bring appeals, they can drop them off here, but you wouldn't be hearing anything that day.
Oh, you come to all those days?
Yes,
I
you just
thought
come
we
to
were
both
picking
dates.
One day.
You're
No, just,
picking,
The beginning
Friday,
and
the
the end.
11th and Friday, the 16th.
At that
What we
time.
Yes.
We would come those
Heard
2
in
days.
cats.
Come in, you adjourn, open in the appeal period, the formal appeal period, straight to the board, and then you come back and, or actually I flipped that, convene and then you can come back later and adjourn at the later date at that time. So
What time of day?
I think they're on there. I think it was
noon.
noon. I think so.
I probably could do that.
But we have to publish it. So the reason we were reaching out about it is because we have to get it out there in circulation 10 days prior to the convened date. And we need additional time because we have to give the newspapers time to get it ready for publish. So
And then
That's-
during that month is when
the formal folks will be submitting formal appeals
and we'll schedule times to meet.
so on the adjourn date when we
This
meet,
just doesn't seem like enough time, a month.
well, you wouldn't meet them in between that time. You don't do any hearings in that time. So we collect all the appeals. I'll get that information to you all, the amounts, and
And
then
after?
you can set the hearing dates.
After the 16th.
Yes, after the 16th.
Okay, sorry. I
Yeah.
have to like go
It's okay.
way big picture and be
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah, it's
so
okay.
From April on this date, this is when it's open for people to make their
Appeal
appeals.
directly to the board,
We're
which
gonna
we take
fill
those.
the bucket up. We're gonna say no more, and we're gonna put the lid on it
Yep.
on the 16th, and then we are going to review it after that period.
So the
That's right.
16th meeting is just a formal meeting. You just
To open.
say
or to
whatever.
Open it.
16 to
And
close.
it could take
Yeah,
10
16
minutes.
to
Could
close.
take 10 minutes. I've seen it take 5. So
Ooh, it's
yeah,
gotta beat the record.
it's coming, open the formal
And then
appeal
May
period.
16th.
If there's,
Is when we're adjourned.
that's right. So if there's property owners with real estate appeals, they're welcome to drop them off, or typically no, people appeal online. So we actually have it set up online to just automatically go to the formal appeals on these dates. So
And I know we touched on this in the beginning, but after that May 16th, when we adjourn, how often are we gonna meet? Before,
Well-
what, June 1st? Wait. Oh, July 1st.
In
It's only 6 weeks.
in this circumstance, it may be that you have to meet to hear timely filed appeals
There's-
a little bit longer.
Past July 1st.
Yeah,
Yes.
you in a revaluation year, you have until December 1st, but if there are a lot of appeals, sometimes there's no way that you can
you meet into the following year.
But yeah.
But next year is the reevaluation year, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Then
Yeah.
we hear the appeals. It's being reevaluated 2025, and we'll start to see the appeals in 2026.
So we're still on 2021 reappraisal cycle because we delayed the current one. So right now it's still January 1 of 21. But the unique thing here is we did 5,000 damage assessments and adjusted property down.
Yeah.
So we'll be potentially hearing those appeals. We sent out 18,000 notices a week ago. We're sending out 1,000 more. And then we're also sending our business personal property. We're beginning that process this week. So those also have damage adjustments to them. So you'll be seeing potentially more than you would in a non-reappraisal year.
Okay.
I'm not seeing much of a difference in the amount right now, which I thought I would, but I'm not.
So it'll
so-
be telling once we open.
Yeah, once you adjourn in May, I'll have a good count for you.
Okay.
And good status. And some of them may decrease as we go. People may just be reporting data issues.
Oh, I
We
see.
may be
They'll
having
be
to collect
resolved.
more information from maybe we didn't know the property was damaged to the extent it was. And
Okay.
then they'll say, well, that's right. I'll withdraw my appeal. So that does happen quite a bit. So we try our best to make sure that we get the data and the hard facts correct before it makes it to you. Sometimes those are still not reported to us, and you may get in here and it just be a data issue. So, but we'll get that good count for you in May when you adjourn.
Okay.
And then, Kurt Euler, our county attorney, recommends that we set a day of the week every so often, twice a month, once a month throughout the year, so that we can be on a regular schedule and actually put that on the hearing notices so that
That's nice.
it's known. Yeah, we all my life is chaos so with kids. So and I'm sure everyone else is very much the same. So we'll try to do that for not only the taxpayers but for our sanity. So
Cool.
yes,
The forms for Ann, do we need to leave them with you?
you can
or-
give them to me. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, or you can always, if you have more information on those, you can scan them and email them to.
I'll just email them to her. I mean, I've
That's
got it. I filled out, but I guess it's just easier to email it to her.
Yeah, it's fine. That works. Yeah, she'll end up scanning them anyway. So
Okay.
So if we scan them, that'll help her out.
Sure, we'll take that in between out. And we are moving tomorrow, so we might be down for a day or two as far as getting things into systems, but we'll get that done.
Make a motion for the meeting to be adjourned.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You made the motion, I'll second it.
I will third it.
No.
No, just
Call for a
kidding.
vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. We got it.
Meeting is adjourned.